got bands. Another panoramic. People ain't check my name.
$39 if you want it.
Flying mic.
Oh. All of my wrist, counting and spin it. Man at the coop, mama no kidding. Chop out the top, hit it in limits. I got some cash, I wanna split it. New paper tag, didn't wanna rent it. Too many fads, too many bitches. Roll my slime, get in my liver. Ready to slide, you can slip it. Hey, we ain't got ties, you ain't gon' ride. You my slime, you my slime. You don't go on my prime. Hey, so I think I ain't telling you lies. When you come to business, I'm handling mine. Yeah, I'm keep face paying my time. Hey, here's like Gucci my pants. She used to dipping on hands. I just spent the rest of my fame. Space my land. Girl got bands. Another pan of red. Drink to the head. Got two cell phones. Yeah, I'm sipping these meds. Two-tone present Rolex. Yeah, they dripping KK. Simon say do. Do what I said. People ain't check my name. Why I say who DJ? Hold him, it's VVS. All of my wrist, counting and spinning. Man at the coop, mama no kidding. Chop out the top, hit it in limits. I got some cash, I wanna split it. New paper tag, didn't wanna rent it. Too many fads, too many bitches. Roll my slime, get in my liver. Ready to slide, you can slip it. Hey, we ain't got ties, you ain't gon' ride. You my slime, you my slime. Hey,
Estaban editing.
panties on panties on panties on panties. Oh, okay.
I didn't even notice. Hey, wait. I need a central layer. I mean, air condition because I think I got a nosebleed because it was too hot for me yesterday. It was very random. What do you think about albino people? Huh? Hey, what do you think about fuck albino people? Eddie, let's make a business, Eddie. A business of candy. Yes or no? Why not? Why not?
Así que hicimos el Ford Mustang para rendir. Y la Ford Escape.
Good, yes.
You like to jam out in your car, but your speakers kind of sound like they're underwater. The Miata only has two little door speakers and no roof. I can't hear the music. So today, we're going to install a 6 set of JL Audio speakers and amp so I can finally start to hear the music. We'll talk about how to pick a set of speakers, how to match an amp to them, and then finally, of course, how to install them. We'll see if all the time, money, and effort it takes is worth it. I have a feeling it's gonna be. Speakers and no roof. You like to jam out in your car, but your speakers kind of sound like they're underwater. The Miata only has 2 little door speakers and no roof. I can't hear the music. So today we're going to install a 6 set of JL Audio speakers and amp so I can finally start to hear the music. We'll talk about how to pick a set of speakers, how to match an amp to them, and then finally, of course, how to install them. We'll see if all the time, money, and effort it takes is worth it. I have a feeling it's gonna be. I'm Zach and this is Money Pit. It's time to hear the music!
Big Throw Maze for sponsoring today's video. Off-roader, you had to just think you...
In terms of loudness at the end of this. For that, there's only one song that we're legally allowed to use. Alright, so with my phone volume maxed out and the head unit volume at 25, we maxed out at 87.8 decibels. Now I'm going to turn it up and do it again, but I just want to get this at kind of a medium volume and at max volume. So, let's turn it up. Well, not only is that not very loud, it sounds terrible. Oh, that was awful. Honestly, even if these things don't get any louder, if they just sound better, that would be a win. But I think we're going to be able to handle both. They're going to sound a hell of a lot better and more clear with better bass reproduction, and they're going to be way louder than that. So, we can only go up from here. And we'll finally be making good use of our head unit. You may remember we put this fancy Pioneer head unit in this Miata a while back. But the fact is, head units don't put out that much power. They don't put out a bunch of power to your door speakers, so if you're just relying on your head unit to power your speakers, well, you're relying on a pretty weak muscle. That's where an amp comes in. And that should really take these speakers to the next level. It'll power them really nicely, really cleanly. It'll sound crisp. The sound overall is going to sound a lot better than what this head unit can crack out. So, I'm excited. I think this is going to be a big benefit to the old Miata. So to fulfill my fantasy of actually hearing music in the Miata, here's what I got. I got JL Audio's entry-level set of speakers. These are their C1s in a 6.5 inch, which is what you need for the Miata. And then I also got their 4-channel 400-watt amp. That is going to be a nice match with these speakers. And together, they should sound great. JL Audio is probably my favorite audio equipment company, so I'm really hoping they don't disappoint. Then, of course, to tie it all together, we've got our amp wiring kit. This is an important part of any amp and speaker install. You need to be able to power your amp, give it a signal from your head unit, and then send the music signal to your speakers. So altogether here, I'm in about $500, which you can do this for a lot cheaper, but I'm hoping this stuff is going to sound really good. And honestly, being able to hear the music at all would just be great in the Miata. A stereo install is really easy and really pretty standard. It's the same no matter what amp you have, what speakers you have, or what wiring kit you have. So everything we do here today, you'll be able to use no matter what kind of amp you got, or speakers, so on or so forth. Because it's all pretty easy. Now, before we go actually taking anything out of the car, the first thing I want to do is decide where I'm going to mount my new amp. And then that'll kind of guide me through the whole installation process in terms of where I need to route wires and where things need to go. So it should make things go a little bit more smoothly as long as I kind of have that guiding light of where everything is going to go. Now, space is kind of at a premium in the old Miata, so I think we're going to have to move to the trunk, which is pretty normal. Okay, so I think that I'm going to be able to mount this amp right here. That'll be nice, pretty well tucked out of the way, still leave me whatever trunk space I have. I think that'll be great. With the use of some rib nuts, I'll be able to put some threads in here and just screw this puppy right to that bulkhead. So this is where the amp's going to go, so now as I work from here on out, I'm going to be working all my wiring to this spot. The battery happens to be about 1.5 feet from where I'm mounting my amp, so that makes things pretty easy. Now we're going to go pull out those old speakers. Okay, here's our old speaker, an Alpine Type E. And these are decent speakers, even if this one is a little bit beat up. But we'll replace them with something a little bit better. So these speaker wires run through the cabin and back to behind the head unit. But our speaker signal now is going to be coming from the amp, not from the head unit. So we would have to intersect these wires behind the head unit and then wire them to the trunk, which would maybe save a little time, but then we're using this old, crappy, potentially corroded wire It's been in here since '94. So we're going to completely rewire the speaker wire, which does take a little bit of time, but is worth it. It's going to give you the best results. So you do want to get an oxygen-free copper wiring kit, which is the best at transmitting signal without any loss, but you also want to make sure that it comes with speaker wire if you're going to need speaker wire. And you're usually going to need at least some speaker wire. Otherwise, we've got our remote power wire. This is going to go from the head unit to tell the amp to turn on when I turn the key on in the car. And these are our RCAs. And this is what's going to take the musical signal from the head unit and send it back to the amp. These will be wired together from the head unit back to the amp. This will go from the amp to the speakers. This will go from the battery to the amp. And there's our ground wire. That'll go from the amp to the chassis. So these are all the things that we're going to need to do to get our new amp up and running. It's honestly pretty easy and it's pretty standard. This is what it takes to install any amp. And it's not that tricky. It just may be a little scary because wiring stuff is a little weird. But it's no big deal, I promise. So that said, it's time to go chop up some speaker wire. Okay, so I'm basically just going to kind of roughly to the area where we know we're going to install our amp, and I'll leave these a little bit longer than I need them, and I'll trim them to size once everything's in place, but you obviously don't want to go too short. You always got to kind of plan for the zigzags you might have to take when you're finally installing your wire, so they'll have to come up and in a little, and we'll go through our little door grommet, and then into the door. So this is a little bit longer than I'm going to need it, but I'm going to leave that length there and trim it later. So cool, now I'm going to cut that speaker wire at the amp end and do the same thing for the other side. Okay, really that's about all the wire we got. So I'm not even going to trim that for now. It's a couple feet too long, but that's just fine. So now I'm going to pop this door panel off, get this speaker out, and put the speaker wire in the door. So now I just clip those wires and the ends are kind of exposed. Now they're just speaker wires, so it's really not that big of a deal, but it is good practice, you know, when you're doing any sort of wiring or clipping of wires, that you don't leave any copper exposed that can touch other wires or touch ground. And sometimes it's kind of tricky to cover stuff like that up in a way that doesn't look terrible. And for that, I have one of my favorite things for wiring stuff. It's liquid electrical tape. I'm just going to dab a little bit of this on the ends of the wires I cut just to seal them up. Just because it's good practice. Okay, now it's time for, I guess, what's probably going to be my least favorite part of this. It's really never that easy, and for such a silly thing, it can be frustrating. And that's just getting the speaker wire from the cabin and into the door. It means we got to go through this little grommet guy, and the inside of it's pretty obstructed by the dash. I do not intend to take the dash out today.
Oh. ¡Cállate el hocico!
What I'm going to try to do is jam a welding rod through this grommet from the inside of the door to the inside of the cabin, and then hook my speaker wire onto that welding rod, and then pull it through into the door. Now that's our speaker wire through the grommet. Now we just got to do that same dang thing over here. Alright, so now we're basically ready for some new speakers. But before we go slam them in, let's go look at them and talk about them.
Do y'all ever just not eat your food?
You damn largemouth fish! Stop biting my brother!
Hermanito.
Just chomp my brother to pieces and swallow.
Alright, so like I said, we've got this pair of JL Audio component speakers in a 6.5-inch size to go in the Miata. But how did I land on these? And then how do you choose an amp to go with them? The truth is, when it comes to buying speakers, you can spend about as little money as you want and about as much as you want. And There's cheap stuff, there's super expensive stuff, and there's stuff that falls somewhere in the middle. And these fall somewhere in the middle at $120 a pair. Reviews are a great thing to check, obviously, to determine whether or not the speakers you're looking at actually do sound good. But for the most part, most aftermarket speaker companies are capable of making a speaker that sounds great. So a lot of it really comes down to personal preference and how much you want to spend. But then we'd like to choose the speaker that you like. Well, how do you pick an amp to go with it? It seems kind of confusing. But it's actually usually not that tricky. In fact, all you gotta do is either check the description of the website you're looking at them on, or if you have access to the boxes, take a look at them. So let's look at the box right now and see if these speakers are matched to my amp. So, specs here, we've got our continuous power handling at 50 watts, and then the recommended amp power, which says 10 to 75 watts per channel. So, we've got our power here, 400 watt, 4-channel Class D amplifier. It says 100 watts at 4 channels, and that's at 2 ohms. We're rocking at 4 ohms. At 4 ohms, 75 watts per channel. So, you can see that's a perfect match to these speakers at the upper limit of their power handling capabilities. Which means they're going to be as loud as they're designed to be, and it should sound crispy cool. And I also think it's pretty obvious that companies like JL build their amp to go with the speakers that they make. So there's no secret there. If you match your sets between the same company, the same manufacturer, there's usually going to be a great option of things that will play together nicely, like what we've got here, speakers and amp. So now that we know we've got a good match, put them in. Okay, with our speaker wires wired into the doors, now it's time to put some thermal on the ends of these wires. Brass ties right here, and strip a couple of female spade connectors of different sizes to match the speaker under my wire. Beautiful little heat shrink. And that is going to put the speaker in the rear. Alright, both of our speakers are in the doors and fully wired up, ready for the door panels to go back on. But before I do that kind of stuff, we're going to keep wiring. Now it's time to pull out the head unit. So at the back of the head unit, there's generally 2 things that you need to do. You need to install your RCA cables into one of these spots. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. And you need to wire your remote signal wire. Now, that's the wire that takes 12 volts from your head unit when it turns on. When you turn the key on, takes 12 volts from here and shoots it back to the amp to tell it to turn on. Because the amp is always going to have its big fat wires, the battery, and the chassis always powered up. You don't want it always on. You want it to turn on the ignition. So that's what the remote wire does. Now, head unit harness stuff is pretty well standardized. Your remote wire is always going to be a blue wire. Now, there might be a couple blue wires, and you might be confused. So, you can easily test with a multimeter, switch to volt DC, and you can check with the key off and then with the key on. With the key off, you want 0 volts. With the key on, you want 12. So, we'll just do the second half. There's my remote wire, I think. And we test it with the old voltmeter. We've got a whopping 10.8 volts. Turn the key off. And you see that it goes down to 0 volts. So that's a quick and easy way to check for your remote wire. The only thing we have left to do is the RCAs up here. You've got your sub